Thank you for these very rich and diverse presentation, if I may say so. Clearly, the two last presentations have challenged the concept of this meeting. I mean, trying to combine, because of the regulatory capture, the general impression that it's not the people, but it's a system, which in fact, and I would suggest that these questions, which are very important as well, should also be considered in a block where we consider what else can be done in general, medium term, short term. But my first job is try still to answer the questions which were at the core of the organization of this meeting. And so I will try to put my own question. Of course, I've listed some questions myself. It has been now clarified in certain aspects. But these will be questions which I will ask panel members to react to, and I will go through all panel members if they want to react to the first series of questions, which is how to make it attractive for experts to participate in the work here. And the second series of questions, which would be, are the safeguards okay or not? And then what else can be done? So I could do that rather quickly because we have only half an hour. I will ask also Noël Watillon, before we stop, to clarify any issues which might lead to misunderstanding about defining certain concept as used in the agency policy. And if I have had a chance, I would also direct questions to the European Commission and to the national competent authorities before we leave, and if not at the beginning of the session, because they have an important voice to express before everybody else starts. As I said before, if you have any questions, it would be nice if you could just write them down with your name and in what category of the three categories they belong before the lunch break, so I can organize then each half an hour without losing too much time. I hope that question 1 and 2 are okay for the two last panelists, because it doesn't deal with allowing conflict of interest at all. It is the main question, how, and this is the same question for scientific associations, for the drug bulletins, how attract the best expertise? And then conflicts, no conflicts at all, or how do you mitigate the conflicts, which is the second question. So I hope this is acceptable to both of you as a sort of first approach. And I would say what you said belongs very much to the third element, which is what additional safeguards or transformation of the system you would like to see in future. So I give you my own perspective before having heard what the panelists have said. So that's why I would like to give them the floor again. So the incentive for best expertise. What I hear is experts, governmental experts, work for free in a way, need a better recognition of they have a real job. And it has to be made clear at European level and internationally. There were ideas that maybe the agency could support their participation in certain conferences and so on. So the question is, could we go through it again, and what concrete measures? Since there are governmental experts in most cases, my second question is, and we've heard that this is a problem, could there be a better recognition or career at home for having provided their expertise to the European system? And Serge said no. At the moment, there is none. So I think both levels have to have rewards, recognition and rewards. The third element, which from the beginning for me as the first director was very important, is being concerned about welcoming and supporting the experts when the delegates when they are here, the sort of delegate policy. And we had started with satisfaction surveys, and it's very much about practical elements, but couldn't we in future add to that survey, if they are done regularly, some elements about the conflict of interest policy, so that you know not only from certain voices, but you know from the global stock of experts how they feel, and more importantly, in a free text, what they would suggest. Then we heard that money is not the main issue for the experts, but nevertheless, it is an important parameter in life. And the system as it's run in the European agency here, but different from independent experts in the Commission, ECDC, is that here the payments for providing the expertise are generally made to the national competent authority. And this represents 30% of the budget of the agency. Normally, the expert should, at national level, benefit from it, directly, indirectly in their careers, or because of the days of work for the agency should be compensated to the national authority. But how in practice does this work? It doesn't seem to work so well, as we heard. If that cannot work, should in future the expert benefit from direct payments, in that case, they would have to be taken from the other pot. My additional concerns are, since this is a general problem everywhere, can we learn more from Commission or other EU agencies? And we have representation of the Commission and the EU agencies here. And what are the best practices in national competent authorities, in the Food and Drug Administration, and also in professional association? For example, the Cochrane centers, how, apart from the reputation and the pride of being part, are there other mechanisms which allow them to attract the best expertise? So this is a rather limited view before the discussion starts, but I'd like just to go around in the same order and ask whether you want to comment or add something about theater.
Yes, thank you. I think I can give quite a few answers to your questions. First of all, of course, better recognition in both in the EU, but also in the Germany, for example, of providing expertise to the EMA is absolutely necessary. However, we have the problem in the academic career at the moment that the impact factor is the most relevant. And as you know, clinicians are interested in participating in sponsored trials because they will be published in the leading medical journals. They get a lot of impact factors. But on the other hand, this is probably not the best reputation you can get from scientific advice, from scientific contribution in basic science, etc. Therefore, I think we have to change a little bit the whole system of academic career, and then probably also the reputation getting from being an expert in the EMA or in other international organization will be better. I think the proposals from the French colleague are excellent. I strongly support that. Probably it is not realistic to expect that the expert will get a lot of remuneration from the EMA based on your financial possibilities. On the other hand, if experts in that field get remuneration to go to the leading, there are quite a few in each discipline. I think it makes no sense to go to 10 congresses per year, but to go to the leading congresses and to be independent from the financial support of the industry is very important. And I know from my colleagues from our team that this would be very helpful that they are not financed by the hospitals, they are not financed, they get not financial support from the universities. They need some financial support, and it's much better, for example, if the EMA will support experts who contribute to this scientific advisory groups or other organizations. I think this would be a major step in the right direction. And yeah, should expert benefit from EMA payment? I can only speak from the German perspective. I think question 4, this is probably not possible. Now, should EMA compensate directly? I mentioned before some financial support for participation in congresses. I don't know the policies of the Commission of the EU. I cannot comment on that. I think by establishing our own conflict of interest policy in Germany, we have really looked at nearly all the policies available from medical societies, from international organizations. It's very difficult to get to find the best practices at the moment. As mentioned before, we are on a learning curve. Now we know what are the essentials. On the other hand, there are many open questions that cannot be answered at the moment. I'm very convinced that the professional association, at least in Germany, are not the right way to get better information. Thank you.
Okay, Anja?
Yes, thank you very much. For me, first of all, I think it's important that when we are looking into this, that we are discriminating between experts that work for national competent authorities and experts that come from academia. There are different motives. And my understanding is that it's not about the money. I don't think it's about the money. I think what experts are, what drives them, but maybe you need to ask them, maybe you need to make a survey to get these answers from someone who's really in it. But what I think is the scientific excellence of the work that's being done. I mean, it's really, really interesting to be involved in some of the front material, some of the really new stuff here. And I think that's what drives them mostly. And also, secondly, what a big driver is the contact with peers, with the network, with other experts in their field. And that could maybe be, and then of course the recognition. And those could maybe be combined and saying, if EMA would be more leading in putting up official groups or boards or whatever, it doesn't have to be someone who meets physically because that costs money and plane tickets and all that. But if you are being called in as an expert in a certain area, a scientific advisory group, whatever, then you will get the recognition of being member of that one, and that would have some sort of international status or whatever. I think that's the way to go, to have some of the really good experts in.
So making more noise about those activities.
About the honor of being involved here, yes.
And
exactly.
we don't have Légion d'honneur or knighthoods at the European level, but it's true that in national careers, this is an important recognition. When you don't get the money, you get the medal. Daniel?
As you might know, I'm a finishing chair of the PDCO. Had my last meeting 2 weeks ago. And it had been said that in pediatrics, everything should be for free. And I'm not so sure that that was a good idea at the very end, because I'm a slightly different view as Anja, not about the money, but about the means. You will tell me that it boils down to the same. In other words, experts do not need money, they need time. And if they want to have to or be able to dedicate some time to it, someone has to compensate. Is it in the university whatsoever? Because at the PDCO, more than 1/3 of the members are coming from academia and volunteer. And we have a problem there. It's even more a problem for the healthcare professionals and the patients, where I can tell you that the attendance is not optimal, to be quite diplomatically correct. And I'm not blaming them at all, because they have no sponsor at home. They are not part of regulators. They are not part of academia. They are on their own. So how could you manage? That's the first point. And the second point is, to me, that these experts are doing a marvelous and excellent job, but nobody knows about it. And, the scientific advice, the pediatric investigation plans, all the assessment, this is somewhat in the secrecy of business here. And if ever these guys would have the impression, due to a better communication, that what they are doing has an impact in terms of deliverables, that would be known, that they have been, part of the job, that would be, to me, the right recognition. Of course, they want to be at the forefront of science, and because they are expert and know. But, at the end of the pipeline, nobody knows who has been involved, who has been done the job, and this, to me, is a real absence of recognition. If we have transparency, I hope that there will be an opportunity to tell them that, and I take my pediatric committee in 5 years or 10 years from now, these guys are the ones who have changed the drug development here by giving, in the very beginning, good scientific expert advice, but nobody recognizes that.
So, because as we heard, publications are not really possible here. You mean authorship in EPARs and guidelines, for example? I mean, some way of having a trace of who did the job, and
it could be collective. It shouldn't be not a name, but this committee and these are the composition, the members. That's what they have achieved.
Okay.
More as a whole.
Okay, thank you. And Nikos?
Well, I think the European Medicines Agency has recognized that the patients face more difficulties, and over the years they have done they have taken a number of steps. Surely, one thing that would be appreciated and could be expanded is indeed more trainings that could be offered to people who are invited to engage and to offer. One thing that I think would be quite useful is that the European Medicines Agency could actively try to emulate the good example of the involvement of patients in its working groups at the national competent authorities. Obviously, even the European Medicines Agency may have learned from AFSAPS or from the UK and from Germany, or probably Netherlands more than. But this is certainly not the case for the rest of the other national competent authorities. So that would be an added something that could help our work locally. Well, I mean, it's partially what I would say comes for your second question. One of the incentives for patients to be able to provide their time, to participate to the pharmacovigilance is a nightmare, and it takes a lot of time, as you can imagine. I think one thing that could be an incentive is that this should not result in complete restriction to engaging outside the European Medicines Agency. I was asked when I applied, are you sure you want to do this? Because, of course, this would mean then that you will not be able to do this, and that, and that. It's actually, I have now to disclose that I'm a member of the board, and of course that immediately says no towards me from other sectors.
What you just said about training reminds me of a remark I heard at the 10th anniversary of orphan drug, the Eurodies, where they said that they would organize summer universities for training people to become experts. And so why not maybe combine training, a summer exercise between the experts working for the agencies, national and patient groups? Because very often, to my evaluation as an outsider now, is that we have very often the best experts, but they have a narrow field of expertise, and they don't have enough a general feel for public health policies. And this is also necessary, I mean, to put things into perspective, not only the super specialist, but having a feel for other fields and for public health objectives. May I ask Martin?
Yeah, very briefly, because I mostly agree with what's been said before, mainly the need to reinforce the recognition of the work being done. I probably agree also with Mr. Brasseur that the real money is probably more time than money, even though no, money is needed, but time is the real constraint. That's what I hear. One point also that I would like to make, though, is that the cost of being involved without conflicts of interest in a public health agency is increasing now in a context of systematic privatization of research. We've heard from the colleague from the industry that the EU was going to spend a lot of money in public-private partnerships. It's true. It's 20 billion in the next framework program, almost for free, because the activities will be defined by industry itself. No reason, no doubt why the colleague is happy.
That's not correct.
Okay, correct me.
The agenda is set together. This is different than previous partnerships. It's not the industry deciding the program.
Okay,
Yeah,
but,
okay,
but
well-
we'll give him the floor later. Is it
That's it.
Richard?
You are right about the old public-private partnerships. The new ones on the rise in 2020, the agenda is set in partnership with all the stakeholders, so that has been changed. No, I agree with what's been said about recognition. When we look at educating patient representatives to be part of drug development, we have a project in this IMI, public-private partnership, UPATI, which is led by European Patient Forum, which is about educating patient groups to be able to be much more involved. So I'd like to mention that. I think maybe more to help the debate, and particularly for the afternoon, what appeared, I think at least to me and probably to many of you, as sharp differences of opinion in the first round of exchanges here. I think it's worth clarifying the types of experts that the agency uses. And if I use my language on this, is that there is one type of expertise, which is what Pierre and Martin talked about, which is, you know, from that risk assessment, the benefit risk. Would I prescribe this? Would I recommend this to be used? Okay? That's a certain type of expertise. And there are plenty of people without any links with industry. So I fully agree with you that there you can maybe even eliminate the conflict of interest by taking very firm line. And we've got people in the Cochrane collaboration and journals and so on. But the problem is that there is the other type of expertise, which is about how do you develop medicines? You know, what advice do you give? What guideline do you write? And that's not a treatment guideline, that's a development guideline. How do you, when you look at a safety problem, you know, what mechanistic studies should be done? What post-approval work should be designed? Now, that requires a different type of expertise. You don't need, even for a clinical expert, you may not need to still see patients. You know, you need to have been involved in developing medicines. And yes, there is independent clinical research, but actually developing a medicine, making sure it gets to the market, the end bit of it is almost entirely industry. Now, we can have another debate whether that's good or bad, but that's the way it is, okay? And even if we rely on publicly funded early ideas, you know, phase 2, phase 3 development is commercial, almost entirely, right? So if you want someone who understands that and how you do it and how it can be done and to interpret, let's say, violations, problems with study conduct, that's a different type of expertise. And these people look different, you know, and they have may worked in industry or they are still collaborating with the industry because that's how they maintain their expertise. So I hope my comment was aimed to sort of slightly depolarize this, because there is one element of the expertise where you need to take a firm line, like suggested by civil society, but there is a part where you really need to manage it. And that's why I think this discussion is very healthy, and the agency is almost bending over backwards, you know, to make sure that all these various needs are catered for. And I think largely these principles are okay, largely. I think on the recognition side, yes, one needs to work on it. I find this idea about funds for medical congresses extremely interesting, because I acknowledge that when we have our database up and running, it'll be absolutely apparent to people that most of these congresses are funded by the pharmaceutical industry. So, you know, if you want your regulatory experts to go there, you may find another way must fund another way to fund that. So I think that's an interesting idea to build on. Easy for me to say because I don't have to pay for it. But,
Thank you. Rory?
Thank you, Chair. Again, very brief, because most of what has been said before I can agree with. I agree the recognition for people who are at a good level in their career, who are an expert, it's not the finances. But there is one point that was made before, which is for clinicians, the big cost often is locum cover. And that's, so even if the agency, for example, when I'm an external examiner in another university, the first thing they say is, are you been taken off clinics and do you need to get a locum to cover you? That's a financial expense. And if that can be covered, that really takes a lot of the burden off the university. Final point then is with regard to recognition. I mean, let's be blunt. Who doesn't want to get a phone call saying there's a major problem and we think you're the person to sort it out? I mean, that's, you feel good when you go home that day that somebody thinks highly of me. But we don't get appropriate recognition. But I have to say, there was a surprising development in my own university where they changed the benchmark for promotion. And they gave contribution towards the scientific community and the wider community, such as this kind of work, equal recognition with research. And suddenly then you say, well, fine, now I'll do it because I'm actually going to get something for it. And they actually not only put it in writing, they actually acted upon it. Now, in other countries, or whether the commission needs to say, we need to get universities to actually give equal recognition, you'll find far greater participation that way. Thank you.
Okay, Pierre.
Thank you. First, it's very important to identify experts today who would like to contribute. And in one of the preparatory documents, it said that the EMEA is willing to make a public call for expression of interest for independent experts. So this is something to be done. Second, recognition is money and prestige. It's clear. I agree with the other panelists. A third point would be to fund, publicly fund some clinical research. And here, because there are people from the European Commission and European Parliament, this is something very important because you will broaden the pool of academic experts. And when we see what the US are doing, there is a lot of money, public money for clinical research, and Europe is far below. And final point about experts, of course, some experts need to work within industry, external experts. The problem is that we cannot ask these people to be part of the regulation because you said yourself that the experts we have been involved in the research, it's like the father or the mother of the drug. So we cannot expect this mother or father to be really objective. That's all.
May I just ask, whatever one thinks about public-private partnership, the IMI partnership rule is that the money which goes to academia comes directly from the European budget, and the industry has to pay for their own. So this is, there is of course, you can object to the public-private partnership in general, but here there is a solution where you can distinguish who pays whom, and maybe an acceptable solution also in the future.
Yes, of course, there are. We can imagine different firewalls. In France, the drug agency now is no more funded directly by the industry, but in a way it's funded indirectly by more taxes. So, and it changed something because the people inside the agency today, they feel different because they don't receive directly money, and it's clear that the psychological reaction is different.
Serge?
You're a good expert because you have a good experience, you well trained, well formed, and because you're well informed. And this quality, this high standard of quality should be sustained and maintained. And this is the reason why I proposed this sort of participation of the EMA or the national agency. For instance, I must give you an example. In my institution, the amount of money available for the formation of medical doctors is about 50 euro by year. 50. And at present time, I think it's a huge challenge because a whole sector of the continuous medical formation has been left to the care of the industry. It's a fact. At present time, I'm not really sure that any government would provide a serious amount of money to contribute to this. It should be done, but at present time, it's certainly not done. So if the EMA wants to have efficient experts, I think it would be extremely important to enrich the expertise of his own experts by this type of participation. And I'm pretty sure that there will be certainly some feedback from this action for the quality of expertise.
Thank you very much. Now we are very close to lunchtime, and I don't want to stop you from going to lunch. The morning session took a little bit longer than expected, but I hope that you enjoyed also the exchanges. We shouldn't deprive you from having a say also in the afternoon. What I would just like to do very quickly is just to show you my next slide so that you can also think about what is coming in the afternoon, but I'll start again with so when it comes to restrictions, my questions were basically, does everyone in the room accept the approach of EMEA safeguards as they stand? We heard that maybe not everyone. And then there are specific comments on, for example, timing. 2 and 5 years may be too long. I mean, in the German experience, it's 3 years. After 5 years, maybe you are not an expert anymore. And questions about the risk level. Shouldn't there be a risk 0 level rather than risk 1, or another term, and so on? So these are the specific criteria which the paper present, which may be adjusted. There is an important element throughout all the discussion, which is that personal involvement in research has to be clearly distinguished from the corporate interest. The Karolinska Institute example you gave, but it's clear that even if it's personal involvement, whether it's public money or private money, there is a problem. If you evaluate the result of the research, and you had been the researcher, whether the money was public or private. The witness expert concept is already used and may have to be better used in future. And Noel could explain before we close what this concept really entails. It's witness expert basically outside any decision-making process. The patient's plea is to distinguish better between volunteers and staff of a patient organization on the one hand, and also the general consulting from product-specific consulting. And I would say that we once had to recognize that patient organization and professional organization represented in certain committees here have a representative role as well as an expertise role, and that creates a difficulty in itself, because they have still to have this representative role inside or outside the agency. And there was also a very general question about, are there certain niche sectors like veterinary or pediatric or orphan drugs which need a different or more flexibility? We'll discuss that this afternoon. I had additional questions under the what else, which is a vast area, but I think I want to echo the importance of values in our discussion. And everybody said, I mean, it's not the experts which are at stake, they are generally honest and so on, but it's understanding what values we share and what can be a motivation. So in their reputation, their integrity, show some gratitude, and the negative ones accept sacrifices and avoid suspicions, undue suspicions. If there was a question about the procedure of getting experts on the list. Anja has alluded to that it was rather heavy, and this could also be answered by Noel. My point is also that at European level as well as national level, if you organize the discussions, and we have heard that decision-making distinguished from advisory and so on, and the dynamic of the peer review itself are a very important way of neutralizing any residual conflicts which may exist. And it's even more true at European level, because all the people around the table belong to different hierarchies. They don't have the same employers when they go home, so they don't have a sort of influence in one direction. So this is something which maybe cannot be expressed in the guideline itself, but has to be an operational consideration for organizing the work. My next question is, since all these conflict of interest have been on the internet for a certain, where are the whistleblowers? Who wants to take that role? Wikipedia or? I mean, it's so easy now. I mean, the agency here cannot police the whole European Union, but who is going to take that role? My question, pretty provocative, which there is a procedure about breach of trust, which is also on the internet, where the agency director can ask the expert to give explanation. There is a hearing, defense rights, but at the end of the day, the nominating authority is informed about the problem. And my question, should we go further and have a naming and shaming exercise if that was the case? And then this important new element, which has been circulating, but it's now on the table, which is the FBI Sunshine initiative may also help in detecting whatever is not seen at the moment. I had questions for the Commission, Bob and maybe other colleagues from the Commission. They have the overview of what the practices are, conflict of interest, their own scientific committee, which are generally independent, Sanko or DG Research, but also colleagues from agencies. They may have a certain interest to explain the merits of their own case. But the Commission has also a specific position as a nominating authority for patient experts. So what do they think about it? Since they are nominating authority, how do they arbitrate volunteers versus staff and general consulting versus product specific? And then the last question is for national competent authority. There are many of them here represented, but especially the heads, the head of the group is also with us. And without being provocative, I wanted just to say, first of all, national competent authorities have similar problems at home, but also when exercising their activities under the decentralized mutual recognition system. They have to know whether there were any conflict of interest in the initial assessment and so on, the process. So it would be important to know better than we know at the moment, how do they tackle, maybe with diverse solutions, which might all fit their own cultural background, but nevertheless, it's important to know what's the best of their expertise, and do the head of agencies envisage any special initiatives specifically geared at, because if they solve the problem at the root nationally, and they are the nominating authority, there will be less problems at the agency level. One specific argument is that since 77 million per year are spent by the agency to the national competent authority, and there are contracts, there is a mention of conflict of interest, but shouldn't there be a sort of conflict of interest guarantee or follow-up in that contract? And in case there would be a breach of trust, what are the national sanctions? Whether it's a breach of trust in the national procedure or at European level. So these are only open-ended questions, which if you agree, I would like to lead you again through this afternoon. As I said, it would help if any of you had specific comments or suggestions for one point, to hand them over to me so that I can prepare also the session in an efficient way. Thank you very much, and bon appétit.